Hey everybody, this is an exciting video for me today because I just reached the milestone of reading my 50th book. And by just reached, I should say, I'm filming this in September of 2023. And earlier, I think around April or early May, I finished my 50th book since I started really reading in May of 2020, just before, or just as COVID sort of hit. And when the pandemic hit, I just literally out of the blue picked up a reading habit, and I started with the book Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt because a coworker of mine with the company I was working for at the time was talking about the economy with some other person in the hallway, and all of a sudden I was like, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with people like that about the economy and to be able to kind of hang with people and be able to understand what they're talking about and offer my own opinions and just understand more about things like that. So I started with Economics in One Lesson, and oddly enough, this was completely unplanned because it was 3 years later that I finished my 50th book, but my 50th book was Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell, which is actually a fantastic companion book to Economics in One Lesson. But it was pretty cool to reach the milestone of my 50th book, and in light of that, I thought that it would be fun to look back and figure out the lessons that I've learned over the past 3 years in reading. So in the last 3 years, and all the books I've read, and I've read more than 50 at this point. I tried to make this video a couple months ago and, I just got lazy. But I thought that 5 lessons in 50 books would be good. There's probably a lot more I could talk about and a lot more that I've learned in reading these 50 books. But there are 5 things as I was sitting down and reflecting on what I've read in the last 3 years that really stuck out. And I think more than anything, this video is made to encourage you to just pick up a book, pick up a reading habit, and really immerse yourself in what you're interested in to get you to start reading. I mean, reading has changed my life tremendously over the past 3 years, and I can say I do not know where I'd be without reading these 50 plus books, and I'm a completely different person. I'm much better for it, and so if there's anything I can say with this video is that I would say pick up a book you're interested in, go to your local bookstore, and just walk through the aisles and see what sticks out to you and, read one page at a time and get going. And by the way, this is the book that started it all, the very first one. Definitely recommend it. It's a short read. It's like 200 pages, around there. Since it was my first one, I kind of went slow through it. It probably took me, I'm going to guess, a month or two to read this. Now I could probably get through it in a couple weeks, I would imagine, but it was my first one, and it was about a subject that I hardly knew anything about, so it took me a little while, but this is a fun one. I recommend it if you're interested in understanding the economy, and Basic Economics, the one I just finished as well, a little over 700 pages, that one, so kind of a beast, and that one took me about 2 months to finish as well, but I recommend both of those if you're interested in finding more about the economy. And by the way, I will say that I was never a reader before 2020, and I don't know why that is. Partially I think it's because in school, you're kind of forced to read what they want you to read, and that never hit well with me. And it always felt like I was compelled to do something, and historically speaking with me, if I'm compelled to do something, I'm like, screw you, I don't want to do it. That was definitely my mindset, but when I was allowed to choose my own books, and I could kind of dig into those, it was much better. I got way more traction with that. I remember reading the 7th Harry Potter movie.
What an idiot! Oh, what a loser!
When that came out in 2007, I read that in like 3 days. That was over 700 pages, and it was because I wanted to read it. So it always helps, and that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today, is finding something you are interested in to get you going, and that will sustain a reading habit long term. But I think it's important to mention again that I think I read less than 5 books until I was probably 25 years old. So I got started late. It's never too late to start. Best time to plant a tree was yesterday, and the second best time is today. So the first lesson that I came up with out of the 50 books that I've read, the 50 plus books I've read so far, is one that just sort of appeared. I wasn't looking for it, but it just kept coming up. And so I started to document this particular lesson, which is that people love their autonomy. And it's just best not to mess with people's autonomy. And I've read about this across genres, like personal finance, psychology books. I've read it in self-help books. I've read it in books about education and learning. It's just across the map, like people just want their freedom. And it seems simple enough, but it's harder in practice to give them that and to afford them that. There's a book I read called Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, a former FBI negotiator, where he talks about giving people their autonomy in negotiations, whether he's in a hostage crisis or whatnot. It's something that is universal to humanity. People really, really want to, at the very least, they want to think that they're making their own choices. That's the bare minimum. Ideally, they should be given the opportunity to make their own choices, and that's very key across these genres. A quote from Never Split the Difference, that book I was just talking about, says, if you shove your negative leverage down your counterpart's throat, and he's talking about negotiations, if you shove negative leverage down your counterpart's throat, it might be perceived as you taking away their autonomy. People will often sooner die than give up their autonomy. They'll at least act irrationally and shut off the negotiation. This is a quote from The Millionaire Fastlane. It says, additionally, scientific studies have proven that autonomy represents 50% of a person's happiness equation. Are you free to do and buy as you please? Or does money gnaw on every decision, like an itchy wart that never goes away? People want to have freedom financially, obviously. People want to have freedom when they're negotiating with someone else. This was even talked about in a book called Indistractable, and this book discussed a lot of things, but one of them was parenting, and the quote is, our kids need psychological nutrients. According to a widely accepted theory of human motivation, all people need are three things to survive: a sense of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And it was talking about there is a line to walk here. You obviously don't want to just let your kids do whatever you want, but it is beneficial to the parents and the kids to allow them a certain sense of freedom, because they'll grow up and they'll be able to make decisions on their own because parents gave them the freedom to do so before. And so they're not nearly as handcuffed, so to speak, and they're not relying on mom and dad to do certain things like that. And they also respect their parents because they were treated like they were adults with the autonomy that they were given. So I'll wrap up lesson number 1. Give people their autonomy as much as you possibly can. Lesson number 2 is a little cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway, but it's realizing how much I didn't know. Obviously, reading 50 plus books, you're going to learn a lot of stuff. And I've read pretty widely. I would have never in a million years guessed how much education I was lacking until I read probably just through 10 books. And I started to understand, wow, there are a lot of holes in my thinking. And to be perfectly honest, you don't actually get a lot of the knowledge that's needed to get by, I think, especially financially. They don't really give you that knowledge in school, at least through high school. Obviously, you can take courses in college that will help you through that. It's great that those are available in higher education, but in my opinion, I think that we can start teaching kids about personal finance very early. I'm talking like 3rd and 4th grade. You know, just start with teaching them about taxes and retirement and things like that to really get them thinking about it and the importance of it. And I don't think that we're there yet. In fact, we're far from it, because there's a lot of people on YouTube, especially, that talk about these personal finance books, and they're very, very popular for a reason. Like, young people are reading them because they're not given this in their education. And a few that I'd highly recommend that I've already posted videos about, one was I Will Teach You to Be Rich, which is fantastic, and The Psychology of Money, which was really key in kind of understanding that your financial game is your financial game. Like, you got to play your own game. Stop listening to the noise. Stop watching your friends. Stop watching your family. Don't compare yourself to anybody else but you, because it's your financial game to play, and you need to find out what your strengths and weaknesses are and make a game plan from there. But realizing how much I didn't know was super key, and reading books like Factfulness and Apocalypse Never by Michael Schellenberger, and Carl Jung, probably anything by Carl Jung, who will, I mean, honestly, he'll just blow your freaking mind. I promise you. Pick up Modern Man in Search of His Soul or Man and His Symbols, and like really read those for like a month or two and write down your thoughts as you're reading them. And I promise you, you will have a different perspective on almost everything. You'll also realize just how powerful information is. There's that line in the John Mayer song, Waiting on the World to Change, where he says, when they own the information, they can bend it all they want. When I read Freakonomics right here. So this is by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner. Really, really good book. I read this in a couple days. There's a lot of cool information in here. Some of it is like, you know, random facts that you would just pull out at a party randomly, but a lot of it teaches you about kind of incentives and how incentives work, not just in economics, but, you know, in politics, all over the board. But this was the book that taught me that incentives are really what get people to act. fact. And experts, there's a lot of talk about experts in this book. The experts who have the information, it's not that the information is their superpower, it's what they do with the information and how they present it to you. Because they know what the information is, but we don't. And they can present it to you however they want, and how they're going to present it to you aligns with what their incentives are. And if you can identify what their incentives are, it'll make a lot more sense as to what they're doing with the information they're giving you. So really, really good book. Highly encourage you to read it. It's not a difficult read at all, and they make it really interesting the way it's written. And the last point I'll make about realizing how much I didn't know is that to deprive yourself of reading books is like stunting your growth in an incalculable way. I'm not kidding. Like, reading is one of, I think, the few things that if we invest our time and energy into it, the sky is the limit for you. I think I saw a quote from Patrick Bet-David at one point that said, you read 20 pages a day and you will be at the top of your field in 10 years. And I really think that that's true. Because I can tell you, after just 3 years of reading and through almost 60 books, I think completely differently from how I did 3 years ago. And the more you read, the more it'll shine through with your thinking, with how articulate you are, your ability to write, and so on. There actually is one thing that I would disagree with about reading 20 pages a day for 10 years, is that I'm really not focused on the number of pages. I think that that's the wrong thing to look at. For me, I'm much more focused about just reading for, we'll say, an hour a day. But I really believe that reading is the key to unlocking a lot of your potential. Like I said, it's one of the things that you invest your time and energy into it. I promise you, the rewards that you will get in return are going to far outnumber the amount of time and energy that you put into it. Okay, the third lesson is something I've already touched on a little bit, but I really want to hit this point home. But if you are someone who, if you're struggling to pick up a reading habit, the best thing you can do is to forget all of the advice you've been taught and just close your eyes. Think about what you're interested in. It can be anything. And find a book that relates to that topic. It doesn't have to be a long book. It doesn't have to be by a famous author. It can be any book you want. But to get into the habit of reading, you have to pick topics that you are highly interested in. If you read books because they're popular, or you read something because someone told you to read them, which is what happens in school, and it's why a lot of people never develop a reading habit, because we're just told to read things we're not interested in, that's the wrong way to go. You really have to listen to the inner voice that's in you that's telling you what you're interested in, and just follow that. And the cool thing about it is, once you start to pick up a reading habit and then you enjoy reading, who knows where you're going to go? I mean, one of the things I learned is that there's genres that I became interested in, like philosophy. Who knew I'd be interested in philosophy? You talk to anyone in my family and I say, I just finished Plato's 5 Dialogues. They'd be like, you just finished Plato's 5 Dialogues? I'd be like, well, first of all, that's insulting. Okay, of course I finished Plato's 5 Dialogues, It's crazy where you'll go, the confidence you'll pick up once you start to get a reading habit going. You feel like you can tackle any subject at one point. And now, I literally, this is funny, so I literally just bought a Kindle version of the Bible. I mean, I'm going to read the Bible like it's literature, because I found a booktuber. His name is Greg McElroy. He has a great YouTube channel. Highly encourage you to check him out. But he has a book club, and the Old Testament, I think, is part of his recommended reading list. The way he talks about it makes perfect sense. The Old Testament and the Bible in general has influenced almost everything in the Western canon. So if you want to understand the classics and you want to understand your culture, the Bible is so influential, it's connected to everything. So I'm into that now, but that just goes to show you that I'm a kid who started off reading sci-fi, like Harry Potter, fantasy novels, things like that, or I would read sports magazines. And it was just kind of, more basic stuff, but you start there and you pick up the reading habit, and then you want to take on more complex things. Your mindset will shift, and you'll start to be able to think better, and you'll write better. You'll crave to read thinkers who are much smarter than you, and they will expand the breadth of your knowledge. And I think, honestly, with that will come the urge to read more complex subjects like philosophy, and you'll want to read classics and things like the Bible because they're so influential on everything. So read what you're interested in, do your research, make a book list, go on Goodreads, start digging around in there, find other people who are like-minded just like you, and figure out what niche to start in, and just have fun with it. First and foremost, reading is supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be a chore. You can read books that feel like chores, and that probably will happen if you end up forming a reading habit, because there are really, really good classic books that you really have to dig into, and it's going to feel like a chore sometimes. But to start off with, that's my advice, is to pick something that's fun, pick something that you look forward to opening, and just make it fun. Lesson number 4, and this is an important one. It is quality over quantity. I can't tell you how many videos I've watched about people telling you how to read faster, bragging that they've read, 100 books in 5 minutes, and it's like, that's not the name of the game. The name of the game is to read a book at your own pace. And if you're trying to start a reading habit, this is especially applicable to you. Read at your own pace early, whether that's 5 pages a day, I don't care. But just start and read at your own pace. Read it so it's enjoyable. But this whole, how to read 100 books in a year or how to speed read, I used to be into that stuff and I used to think it was important because it's just flashy. It's really, really flashy. You get to post on Instagram and I read 20 books in 5 minutes. And it's like, now that I think I'm experienced enough in reading, all that says to me is that you're not really interacting with the books. You're not having a conversation with them. You're not writing down your thoughts, because if you really read that much, you're not leaving much time to do the other things like soaking in the knowledge and, keeping a journal or writing down your thoughts about the book and interacting with the chapters and giving them the attention they deserve. And I used to be there. I think after my first year, I set a goal of reading 25 books in a year because I thought that was the thing to do. The good readers really sit down, and this is a Ben McAvoy thing. He talks about really sit down with something for probably 6 to 8 weeks and just let it soak in like a fine wine, especially if you're reading classic books. But even if you're not reading classic books, I brought up Freakonomics earlier. You could sit down with that book and, you could easily go down a research rabbit hole into the world of economics through that book and find out a lot of things and take the time to keep a journal and write these things down and really interact with the data they present and find things out that you never knew before. But I think one of the problems in society today is that we want everything so quickly, especially with social media. We just get dopamine hits all the time and we get them really easy. It's hard to turn off the part of our brain that just wants to scroll and scroll and scroll and consume and consume and consume rather than read and think and write and articulate. That's the name of the game. That's the process you want. You want to sit with something. You want to be comfortable with thinking. And I think a lot of people nowadays are not comfortable with the patience that's required of us to be able to wrestle with books and really kind of squeeze all the knowledge we can out of them. And that's a skill, I think, as we get further into the future and as AI becomes more of a thing and ChatGPT, that kind of stuff is doing the thinking for us. And in the future, I think that people who are able to write and think for themselves and they have the patience to do it, I think those people are going to be a hot commodity because there will be a lot of people who take the easy way out and they let the AI do it for them. And I think that reading is a great practice. Reading and writing and thinking is a great practice to do on your own as it becomes more and more scarce in the future. And by the way, if you've gotten any value out of this video, please hit the like button, comment down below. I'd love to know your thoughts wherever you're at in your reading journey. I don't care if you haven't started. I don't care if you've been reading for 10 years and you've read all the books of the Bible 3 times over. That's good news for you, but I would love to hear more from you guys, and I want to know the lessons you guys have gathered over the years in your reading journeys and how your lives have been affected. That'd be awesome to get to know. And as always, please subscribe to the channel for more content, but let's get back to the action. The 5th and final lesson through 50 plus books that I've read over the last 3 years is you will become a different person in the best way possible. Depending on what you read, you will think and act differently. You'll see information differently. You'll see the world differently. You'll be able to have conversations that you weren't able to have before. You'll be a deeper thinker. And the people around you will notice this. A lot of the people around me have started to become interested in what I'm reading, and by default, I'll recommend books to them, and they'll start picking up books. And it kind of just creates this atmosphere around you that's super cool because they're interested in books and they want to know, but sometimes it takes a catalyst in their environment to really kind of, kick them in the ass and get them to go. And I love that. I love when people get interested because of the passion that comes out when you've read all these books and you just want to share the information with people. And a lot of it stems from the fact that I want to get people interested in reading because it's had such a positive effect on my life. And I want to share that with you, and I want to share that with people who are close to me. But I promise you, if you haven't picked up a book and you want to start getting into reading, you will become a different person and you will change for the better. I don't think there's a single person out there who picked up a reading habit and was like, I really regret this. But that, ladies and gentlemen, has been the 5 lessons through 50 books that I wanted to share with you. I hope you got some value out of this video today. Hopefully it's inspired you to some degree to pick up a book and get going. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.